What if the respected leader of your barangay transforms into something hungry when the sun goes down? What if the neighborhood dogs know something the humans don't? In Barangay San Isidro, Batangas, everyone loved Capitan Rodriguez. He'd been our barangay captain for 15 years. Helpful, generous, always the first to arrive when families needed assistance during typhoons or emergencies. But I started noticing things when I moved back home after college in Manila. The dogs in our neighborhood went silent after 10 p.m. Not sleeping quietly, terrified quietly. They'd huddle together, whimpering, refusing to leave their owners' sides once darkness fell. And Capitan Rodriguez? He was always available for late-night emergencies, always ready to help no matter how late you called. Capitan never sleeps, my Lola used to say. That man has more energy than someone half his age. I thought it was admirable, until I started working the night shift at the nearby poultry farm. Driving home at 3 a.m., I'd sometimes see a figure walking the empty streets. Tall, unnaturally thin, moving with a strange, predatory grace. The first time I saw it, I slowed down to offer a ride. We help each other in small towns. But when my headlights hit the figure, it turned toward me. The face was Capitan Rodriguez, but wrong. His features were sharper, more angular. His eyes reflected the light like an animal's. And his mouth was open too wide, revealing teeth that seemed longer than they should be. He smiled and waved, and I drove past without stopping. My hands shook on the steering wheel for the entire drive home. The next day, I asked my neighbor, Tita Rosa, about the captain's late-night walks. "Ay, you shouldn't be out so late," she whispered, glancing around nervously. Some people in this barangay, they change when the moon is high. Change how? She made the sign of the cross. My grandmother told stories about Aswang who live among us. During the day, they're normal people, good neighbors, even leaders in the community. But at night, you think Capitan Rodriguez is Aswang? Shh. She looked terrified. Don't say such things. But have you noticed how many pregnant women have had complications this year? How many families have experienced unexplained tragedies? I hadn't, but now that she mentioned it, that week I started paying attention. 3 families had lost expected babies in the past 6 months. Multiple people in the community suffered from draining illnesses. And Capitan Rodriguez had visited all of these families, offering comfort, bringing food, staying late into the evening to help however he could. I decided to follow him one night. Around 11 p.m., I parked across from his house and waited. At exactly midnight, he emerged from his back door. But something was wrong with his walk, too fluid, like his joints bent in ways human joints shouldn't. He headed toward the Mendoza house where Elena Mendoza was 8 months pregnant. I followed at a distance, heart hammering. The captain moved through shadows like he was part of them, making no sound despite walking on gravel and dried leaves. At the Mendoza house, he didn't knock. Instead, he circled the building, stopping beneath Elena's bedroom window. Then he began to change. His body stretched upward, limbs extending impossibly. His fingers grew into claws, and something dark and wet emerged from his back wings, leathery and glistening. But the most horrible part was his tongue. It extended from his mouth like a snake, easily 6 feet long, probing at the window frame, searching for a way inside. I knew what I was seeing. The stories my own grandmother had told me as a child, warnings disguised as fairy tales. Aswang, the shapeshifter that feeds on life force and vitality from expecting mothers. His tongue found a gap in the window frame and began to extend into the house, toward the room where Elena slept. I grabbed a handful of gravel and threw it at a nearby tin can, making noise. The creature's head snapped toward me, eyes glowing in the darkness. For a moment, I thought I was dead, but instead of attacking, it quickly retracted its tongue and began shrinking back into human form. "Sino yan," Capitan Rodriguez called out, sounding perfectly normal. "Who's there?" I ran, sprinted through the dark streets until I reached home, then locked every door and window. The next morning, Elena Mendoza was found unconscious in her bed. Elena's child didn't survive the night, though no one could say why. The doctors couldn't explain it. Capitan Rodriguez was the first to arrive at the hospital, offering his support and condolences to the family. I wanted to tell someone what I'd seen, but who would believe me? Accuse the beloved barangay captain of being a monster that preys on the vulnerable. Instead, I started leaving small piles of salt around vulnerable houses at night. Salt, garlic, and blessed palms. The old protections my grandmother had taught me. The mysterious illnesses stopped. No more unexplained miscarriages. But Capitan Rodriguez began giving me strange looks during barangay meetings. Long, calculating stares that made my skin crawl. Last month, I woke up to scratching sounds on my roof. Something was up there, walking back and forth, testing the strength of the tin sheets. I found claw marks on my windowsills in the morning. I'm moving back to Manila next week. Found a job, a small apartment, getting as far from San Isidro as possible. But I keep thinking about the other families, the ones who don't know what lurks in their trusted leader. Because the thing about Aswang is they're patient. They integrate into communities, earn trust, and become indispensable. And they know monsters better than we do. What if the ancient balete tree your family warned you about wasn't empty? What if something has been living there for centuries, just waiting for the right person to notice? The balete tree behind our ancestral house in Siquijor had been there longer than anyone could remember. Its massive trunk was hollow in the center, creating a natural cave big enough for a grown man to sit inside. Aerial roots hung down like curtains, and the local kids would dare each other to run beneath them after school. But we were never allowed to play near the tree after sunset. "May nakatira duwan," my Lola would warn us. "Kapre, He's lived there since before my grandmother's time. When I was young, I believed the stories were just superstition. Old folks are trying to keep children from wandering too far from the house. But when I turned 16 and started sneaking out to meet my girlfriend, I learned the truth. It was a humid July evening when I first smelled the tobacco smoke. I was climbing through my bedroom window after a date when the scent hit me. Strong, expensive cigars, the kind my grandfather used to smoke during special occasions. But Lolo had been dead for 3 years, and no one else in our family smoked. The smell was coming from the direction of the balete tree. Curious, and feeling brave in that stupid way teenagers do, I walked toward the ancient tree. The smoke grew stronger as I approached, and I could see a faint orange glow emanating from inside the hollow trunk. I peered through the curtain of aerial roots. A man sat inside the tree's natural cave, cross-legged on what looked like a throne made of woven roots. He was small, maybe 4 feet tall, with dark, weathered skin and wild hair that seemed to blend into the shadows. He wore an old-fashioned barong Tagalog that looked like it hadn't been washed in decades. In his hands was the largest cigar I'd ever seen, easily a foot long and thick as my thumb. The ember glowed bright red as he took a long, satisfied puff. "Magandang gabi," he said without looking up. His voice was like rustling leaves. Finally, someone with manners enough to visit properly. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to turn and sprint back to the house, but something kept me frozen in place. "You're the Kapre," I whispered. Ah, the boy has some education. He looked up at me with eyes that reflected light like an animal's. "I am Datu Malayan. I have been the guardian of this tree since before your great-great-grandmother was born." Guardian. This tree is sacred ground, boy. A portal between your world and ours. I keep watch, make sure nothing dangerous crosses over. He offered me the massive cigar. Care to share? It's been lonely these past few decades. People used to leave offerings, pay proper respect. Now they just ignore the old ways. Against all common sense, I found myself sitting down at the edge of the hollow. The Kapre's presence was oddly comforting, like sitting with a favorite uncle. "What kind of offerings?" "Tobacco, mostly. Sometimes rice wine, or sweets for my sweet tooth." He grinned, revealing teeth stained brown from years of smoking. "Your grandmother used to bring me pandesal every Sunday after church when she was your age." We sat in comfortable silence while he smoked. The tree around us felt alive, breathing, like we were sitting inside some benevolent giant. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. His expression grew serious. "Because something is coming. Something that shouldn't cross over. And I'm going to need help keeping it on the other side." Over the following weeks, I began visiting Datu Malayan regularly. I'd bring him cigarettes from the Sari Sari store and listen to his stories about the old days, when spirits and humans lived in closer harmony. "The tree is weakening," he explained one night. "Too many people have forgotten what happens if it breaks completely. Things that should stay buried come back to life. Spirits that were banished find their way home. And some of them..." He shuddered, an expression that looked strange on his weathered face. "Some of them are very angry about being sent away." As if summoned by his words, we heard it that night. A low, mournful wailing coming from somewhere deep within the earth. "Patay," Datu Malayan whispered, his cigar falling from his lips. The restless dead. They're testing the barriers. The wailing grew louder, and I could feel the ground beneath us trembling. The balete tree's leaves rustled violently despite the lack of wind. What do we do? You must convince your family to resume the old offerings. Bring others to pay respect to the tree. Feed its power with belief and reverence. But when I tried to explain to my parents, they laughed it off as teenage imagination. When I told my friends, they dared me to prove it by bringing them to meet the Kapre. That was my mistake. The next night, I brought 3 classmates to the tree. But when we arrived, Datu Malayan was nowhere to be seen. Instead, the hollow was filled with a cold, fetid wind that smelled like rotting flesh. "Where's your imaginary friend?" June taunted, stepping closer to the tree. That's when the ground split open. A skeletal hand burst through the earth at the base of the balete tree, followed by an arm, then a skull with glowing red eyes. More hands erupted around the tree's roots, dozens of them, all reaching upward. The dead were clawing their way back to the world of the living. My friends scattered, screaming, but I couldn't move. The skeletal figures were pulling themselves out of the ground, their hollow eyes fixed on me. "You broke the treaty," one of them hissed in a voice like grinding bones. "You brought non-believers to sacred ground." I didn't know. The Kapre can no longer protect this place. The barrier is broken. More undead were emerging. I could see the lights of our house in the distance, where my family slept, unaware of what was happening. That's when Datu Malayan appeared. But he wasn't the small, friendly Kapre I'd been visiting. This version was massive, easily 8 feet tall, with glowing green eyes and bark-like skin. His voice boomed like thunder. "Return to your graves!" The undead hissed and snarled, but they began sinking back into the earth. The cracks in the ground sealed themselves. When it was over, Datu Malayan shrank back to his normal size, but he looked exhausted, ancient. "The tree must be moved," he said sadly. "Too much damage has been done. I can hold the barrier for maybe 1 more month, but then? What happens then? Then I must go with the tree, and this place will belong to the dead." The next morning, I convinced my family that the old balete tree was dangerous. "Termite damage," I said. "Risk of falling during typhoon season." They hired workers to carefully transplant it to the town cemetery, where it would be surrounded by properly blessed ground. Datu Malayan went with it, of course. Sometimes I visit him there, bringing tobacco and pandesal like my grandmother used to do. He keeps watch over a different kind of portal now, making sure the cemetery's residents stay properly buried. But he still warns me about the old house, about the spot where the balete tree used to stand. "Some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed," he says, blowing smoke rings that form strange patterns in the air. "Be careful what you invite in, boy. Be very careful what you invite in." What if the last bus home wasn't going home at all? What if the Tikbalang leading you astray doesn't just want to confuse you? It wants to keep you forever. I missed the 8 p.m. bus from Baguio to Manila by 3 minutes. Watched its taillights disappear around the corner while I stood there with my duffel bag, cursing my bad luck. Next bus leaves at 6 a.m., the dispatcher told me with the indifference of someone who delivered bad news 1,000 times. I couldn't afford a hotel room, and sleeping at the terminal wasn't appealing. That's when I noticed the small bus was parked in the shadows at the far end of the lot. Manila, read the faded destination sign. An elderly conductor sat beside the door, chewing betel nut and spitting into a can. "Last trip," he called to me, "leaving in 5 minutes." The fare was suspiciously cheap, half what the major bus lines charged. But I was tired, broke, and desperate to get home. "Puede na," I said, handing him my money. The bus was nearly empty. Just me, a woman clutching a rosary in the front seat, and an old man near the back who kept muttering prayers under his breath. Not exactly the usual crowd for a Manila-bound bus, but maybe that's why the fare was so low. The driver was tall and thin, wearing a barong that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. His hair was long and unkempt, hanging down his back in tangled locks. When he looked at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes seemed too large for his face. We pulled out of the terminal and onto the mountain highway. Standard route, down through the winding roads of Benguet, through Pangasinan, then south to Metro Manila. But something felt wrong almost immediately. The woman with the rosary was praying more intensely, her whispers growing urgent. The old man's mutterings got louder, and outside the windows the landscape looked different. The trees were too thick, too tall. The mountains had shapes I didn't recognize. And despite driving for over an hour, we hadn't passed a single town, gas station, or even another. He turned to look at me, and I noticed his teeth were stained red from betel nut. When he smiled, the stains looked like blood. "Shortcut," he said simply. "Faster this way." But we'd been driving for 3 hours now, and the road seemed to be getting more narrow and primitive. The asphalt gave way to rough concrete, then to packed earth. Trees closed in on both sides until their branches scraped against the bus windows. The woman in front stood up abruptly. "Driver, stop the bus. I need to get off." "No stops until Manila," the driver replied without slowing down. "This isn't the right road. We should have reached Dagupan by now." The driver laughed, a sound like horses whinnying. "Sit down, Ate. We'll get there when we get there." The woman looked back at me with terror in her eyes. "We're lost," she whispered. "He's leading us in circles." I looked out the window and felt my stomach drop. She was right. We'd been passing the same cluster of bamboo trees for the past 20 minutes. The same crooked acacia, the same oddly shaped boulder. We were driving in an enormous circle, and somehow none of us had noticed until now. "Driver," I shouted, standing up. "Stop the bus right now." But when I looked toward the front of the bus, the driver's seat was empty. The steering wheel was turning by itself, guided by invisible hands. The old man near the back began laughing maniacally. "Tikbalang," he cackled. "I told you. I tried to warn you." That's when I saw him. In the driver's seat materialized a creature that was part man, part horse. His upper body was humanoid but covered in coarse, dark hair. His legs were those of a horse, hooves clicking against the bus pedals. His face was an impossible mixture of human and equine features. Elongated skull, large dark eyes, and a mane of black hair that flowed like water. Welcome deeper into woods that shouldn't exist. What do you want? The woman screamed. Companionship, the Tikbalang replied. It gets lonely, leading travelers astray. Usually I just confuse people for a few hours, let them find their way home eventually. But you three, you seem like you'd make good permanent passengers. The forest around us began to change. The trees grew larger, more ancient. Spanish moss hung like ghostly curtains, and in the moonlight, I could see other buses scattered throughout the woods, dozens of them, from different eras. Some looked decades old, others were just rusted metal frames. How many people have you brought here? I asked. Oh, hundreds over the years. Some try to escape on foot, but they just get more lost. Others eventually accept their fate and become part of my collection. The bus finally stopped in a clearing filled with abandoned vehicles. The Tikbalang turned around to face us properly, and I could see his full form. He was magnificent and terrifying, a creature of old magic that belonged to forests and mountains, not modern highways. House rules are simple, he explained. You can wander the forest as much as you like, but you'll never find your way out. The roads will always lead back here. Your families will assume you died in an accident. No one will come looking. The woman was sobbing now. The old man had gone quiet, staring out at the bus graveyard with the blank expression of someone who'd given up hope. But I remembered something my grandmother had told me about Tikbalang. They're tricksters, not killers. They feed on confusion and mischief, not death. What if we could offer you something better than companionship? I asked. The Tikbalang tilted his horse-like head. Such as a challenge, a game. His large dark eyes glittered with interest. What kind of game? Riddles. 3 questions. If we answer correctly, you let us go. If we fail, we stay forever. The Tikbalang clapped his hands together like a delighted child. Oh, I do love but if we win, I continued, you have to return everyone you've ever taken. All the passengers from all those buses. He considered this, then nodded slowly. Agreed. But the riddles will not be easy. For the next hour, the Tikbalang posed 3 questions that tested not just intelligence, but knowledge of Filipino folklore, history, and language. The woman, whose name was Sister Carmen, turned out to be a retired teacher. The old man, Tatay Eduardo, had been a scholar before his retirement. Together we managed to answer all 3 riddles correctly. The Tikbalang looked genuinely surprised, then broke into a wide grin. Well played. I haven't lost a riddle contest in over a century. True to his word, he led us back to the highway, the real highway this time. As we walked, the forest filled with the sounds of starting engines. All those abandoned buses, carrying their long-lost passengers back to the world of the living. Don't look back, the Tikbalang warned as he left us at the roadside. Some journeys are better left as memories. A legitimate bus to Manila picked us up 20 minutes later. The driver was completely human, the fare was normal, and we reached the city just as the sun was rising. But sometimes when I'm driving through mountain roads at night, I'll see a bus with dim headlights following behind me. In my rearview mirror, I can make out a tall figure with long, dark hair behind the wheel. The Tikbalang keeps his word, but he's still out there. Still offering shortcuts to travelers who are too much in a hurry to be careful. If you're ever traveling the mountain highways and see a bus offering cheap fares and impossible travel times, keep walking. Wait for the next one. Some shortcuts aren't worth the risk.